Welcome to Season 2 of the Fraud Files Unleashed, where true fraud investigations meet captivating storytelling. I'm Austin, a seasoned fraud fighter with over 8 years of experience in both law enforcement and banking. Join me on a first-hand journey through real cases, offering insights into the dangers and intricacies of fraud. Whether you're a fellow fraud fighter or just eager to learn more about fraud prevention, I invite you to tune in. Brace yourself for a mix of knowledge, humor, and plenty of coffee. Let's uncover the secrets of fraud together. Season 2, Episode 1. The Fly King Gets Dethroned. Cracked Cards and Laundering Liquor. Back in the recording studio at last. And by recording studio, I mean sitting at my desk with a few shots of espresso and my USB microphone. Close enough. This fraud file is the perfect way to kick off Season 2, The Incredible Card Coders, because this was one of those crooks that I chased down for months, maybe even over a year. My culprit went by the street name, the Fly King. And honestly, he had a pretty fly operation. Not only had the Fly King slid under the radar for years without his re-encoded credit card business getting caught, but he was making big money. The sad reality is, anyone can make big money by buying stolen or compromised card numbers on the dark web or in Telegram groups. Card encoders can be bought for cheap as well, and they allow for you to re-encode the data on any plastic card with a mag stripe. The mag stripe is that dark black line you see on the back of your cards. That's right. You can have a stolen credit card number re-encoded on any card that has that mag stripe. A gift card, a hotel key card, or even another legit looking credit card. The Fly King took great pride in sneakily re-encoding stolen credit card numbers onto the mag stripe of card stock. But with great power comes... With great fraud comes even greater jail time. With great greatness comes badness. Well, how about we just jump back to 2020 and I'll tell you about this fraud investigation I worked. You probably know the deal at this point. I'm a criminal fraud detective at this point in my career, and I am a fraud fighter passionate about stopping fraudsters, especially those who are making a living out of defrauding innocent people. Realistically, though, more often than not, our fraud investigations were left unsolved. That's exactly how this fraud file started out. On an ordinary Thursday, I got an ordinary case. A victim reported having their credit card compromised somehow, and they had unauthorized transactions totaling $400-ish at a local chain liquor store. The victim still had their credit card in their possession, which was important for a few reasons. This meant my victim's card data was compromised in some way. And this meant my crook had re-encoded that stolen card onto a counterfeit card. This is so much more common than the average person would realize. I'd get a case like this on my desk probably once a week or so. As I mentioned, the tools needed to re-encode cards is cheap, and so is your private data. Often, these cases die off with minimal leads. Why's that? Well, our biggest lead for these cases was often video surveillance. And if you didn't know, around 2020, it became acceptable for anyone to wear masks in public. Criminals took great advantage of this. So I requested video surveillance for this case, identified my subject making the fraudulent transaction, who was of course wearing a full mask. And I sent out a bulletin with a still shot photo of my subject, just to see if any other nearby agencies or anyone in the community could identify this mystery man with a medium build, a clean short buzz cut, and some flashy clothes paired with a gold chain around his neck. Case closed. On to the next one. I could use some more coffee first, though. I walked down the hallway of our offices to see if anyone else wanted to grab some Joe with me. But then I walked in on some coworkers plotting some shenanigans. Or maybe I had more to do with this plotting than I want to admit. One of our coworkers was out of the office for the day, and we could not resist ourselves. We thought it would be a great idea to move their entire office with all of their belongings completely to the other end of our hallway into a vacant office. We moved everything. We set up everything to mimic their exact setup in their original office. We even hung up the awards and certifications back up on the wall. When our poor coworker returned to their vacant office the next day, you could certainly hear us all snickering down the hallway like a bunch of little kids. We happily showed him his new home, and he was in shock to say the least. The best part is, he never moved back to his old office. It was not worth the hassle at that point. Good times. Anyways, weeks passed, and then something interesting happened. I got another fraud file on my desk for a credit card fraud case involving unauthorized transactions at that same chain liquor store for about $500 this time. Now my fraud senses were tingling. Sometimes fraud fighters have this unique ability to remember patterns seen on previously worked cases. And thank goodness I did, because this case sounded nearly identical to the case I closed out a few weeks ago. Sure enough, video surveillance confirmed my suspicions. My masked subject was still actively committing fraud. Commit fraud once, shame on you. Commit fraud twice, shame on me. Now, I wasn't willing to let this case go. I started deep diving down any lead I could find. I started comparing victims' bank statements to see if I could find any transactions in common. The goal here was to see if this subject was compromising cards via a gas pump skimmer, a point of sale skimmer, or some other method. No luck here, though. Both victims also had different banks and didn't necessarily live close to each other. I had no luck finding the source of the compromise at this point. Then I decided to start searching for other police reports in our county involving stolen credit cards being used specifically at this chain of liquor stores. Because humans are creatures of habit. Don't believe me? If I took a look at 1 month of your bank statements, I could likely track you down in person. Because you have patterns. You may grocery shop every Monday at a store near your house. You may hit up a certain fast food joint on most Sunday afternoons. Or you may tend to visit a certain entertainment spot on Friday night. Fraudsters are human and they follow patterns. My crook in this case seemed to be targeting liquor stores, and they had already hit up the same chain twice at different locations. So, they were likely going to continue to do so because it has become comfortable for them. As sure as my dad jokes are corny, I hit the jackpot. I found several additional fraud reports involving what appeared to be my same subject committing fraud at liquor stores dating back over a year. These investigators also pulled video surveillance, and lucky me, one of the still shot photos showed my subject up close and personal with no mask on. Now I can work with this. I sent out updated bulletins and started putting together a visual evidence board. You know, exactly like you'd see in those detective movies. I pulled out my detective hat, my pipe, and my monocle, and exclaimed, "Meh, there's been a murder." Okay, maybe that never happened, but I did put together an evidence board. I still had no idea who my subject actually was, though, but I kept digging and digging. Months later, I felt like giving up, but I just couldn't let it go. I was finding minimal leads at best, but then I made a connection with a fellow detective out of Gainesville, Florida, that changed my life. This talented detective had access to some super secret tools that were able to identify my subject based on the face shot that I had. My subject had a street name of the Fly King, as you already know. And now that I knew who he was, I had enough to track down his social media accounts, his address, and his criminal records. The Fly King was an influential man on Facebook. Don't try to find him though, because I changed up his street name a little bit. I don't need all of you social media sleuths out there tracking down crooks and causing issues. And I always change names for privacy purposes, of course. Anyways, the Fly King made this too easy for me. For the past few years, the Fly King has been hosting huge block parties in Orlando, Florida. And guess what they listed prices for on Facebook? The exact same liquor that they were buying from these liquor stores using stolen credit cards. You know, the Fly King had a pretty solid business. It'd be a shame if I were to shut the whole operation down. The Fly King was also very vocal about his relationship with his current girlfriend. As a criminal detective, I must admit, I had a toxic habit. I often used family members or friends to help positively identify subjects, and I had a blast doing it. While I knew who my subject was, that's actually not enough in law enforcement. You usually need an independent person to identify your subject in order to consider your individual positively identified. This is usually true when it comes to video surveillance. So, I grabbed a fellow detective and paid the Fly King's girlfriend a special visit. We just so happened to catch her as she got off work and had just entered her apartment. She nervously opened the door and invited us inside. And this apartment was completely empty. No couch, no furniture, no food. This place was a ghost town. Drug paraphernalia littered the countertop, but I wasn't here for all that. I cut straight to the point and dropped a photo of the Fly King on the kitchen countertop and stated, "Who is this?" Sometimes being blunt was best in situations like this. Of course, she tried to play it dumb and said she didn't know, but I wasn't going to let that fly. You get it, Fly King, fly. So I said, "You don't know who your boyfriend is?" I think at this point she knew her gig was up. And honestly, I don't think she wanted us in her apartment for any longer than we had to be. She replied back, "Well, we aren't really that close anymore. We're not like that." And I fired right back, "Well then, why are you lying to me?" After a quick roll of her eyes, she muttered, "That's Fly King." And she later confirmed his full legal name, and I had everything I needed at this point. The Fly King's girlfriend seemed confused though, and asked, "When is Fly going to be released?" Released? I'm working an investigation, but I didn't tell her anything else about an arrest. I replied back with, "What are you talking about?" She blurted out, "Well, he was booked this morning by Volusia County. Is that not why you guys are here?" At this point, I was in shock. No, that's not why we're here, but I'll check in on that for you. Don't worry about it." After leaving the vacant apartment, I washed my hands very thoroughly, and I pulled up the arrest report. Sure enough, the Fly King had a search warrant done on his house that morning. And guess what they recovered? Credit card embossing equipment, credit card re-encoders, and all sorts of other evidence that was being seized. Man, I wish I knew about this ahead of time. Now that I knew exactly where to find the Fly King and I had him positively identified, I quickly paid him a visit. And he was not happy to see me. In fact, he didn't really want to talk to me at all. Shocker, right? He played dumb and really gave me nothing of substance in my interview. He was shocked to find his girlfriend dimed him out, though. She's the one that solidified my case. The Fly King wouldn't admit to buying the victim's card info off the dark web, and he really wouldn't tell me where he got it from. But he kind of alluded to the fact that he had a contact that was running the operation. He didn't want to cooperate any further, so I couldn't help him out either. Felony charges galore were filed, and the Fly King was eventually transferred to our county jail to serve his time. You may be the Fly King, but you're no Burger King. You can't have it your way. Getting the Fly King off the streets was a huge relief. Realistically, I think he only served time for about a year or so. In the process of catching and arresting this one subject, the Fly King, many others got away. This was definitely an organized group, but I never had enough information to track down the other players that were helping the Fly King with his operation. Sometimes, in fact most times, you don't catch them all. And there you have it, fraud fighters. Re-encoding compromised cards may be easier than you realize, but committing fraud always comes with a cost. Join us next time as we delve into the world of financial intrigue, exposing the tricks of the trade while sharing a laugh you. Remember, not all heroes wear capes, some wear accountant badges and detective hats. This podcast is presented by Fraud Warfare. If you are interested in supporting us through promoted ads, please connect with me on LinkedIn. Do me a huge favor and share this podcast with a friend or family member, and be sure to leave us a review on your podcasting platform of choice. You can also support us financially through our buymeacoffee.com/fraud warfare page. 100% of these funds go towards improving the quality of our podcasts and, of course, some coffee. Thanks for listening.